Welcome back. Let's read this one.
Bulletin board system. Not to be confused with Internet forum software. A bulletin board system, BBS, also called a computer bulletin board service, CBBS, was a computer server running software that allowed users to connect to the system using a terminal program. Once logged in, the user could perform functions such as uploading and downloading software and data, reading news and bulletins, and exchanging messages with other users through public message boards and sometimes via direct chatting. In the early 1980s, message networks such as FidoNet were developed to provide services such as netmail, which is similar to Internet-based email. Many BBSs also offered online games in which users could compete with each other. BBSs with multiple phone lines often provided chat rooms, allowing users to interact with each other. Bulletin board systems were in many ways a precursor to the modern form of the World Wide Web, social networks, and other aspects of the Internet. Low-cost, high-performance asynchronous modems drove the use of online services and BBSs through the early 1990s. InfoWorld estimated that there were 60,000 BBSs serving 17 million users in the United States alone in 1994, a collective market much larger than major online services such as CompuServe. The introduction of inexpensive dial-up internet service and the Mosaic web browser offered ease of use and global access that BBS and online systems did not provide, and led to a rapid crash in the market starting in late 1994 to early 1995. Over the next year, many of the leading BBS software providers went bankrupt and tens of thousands of BBSs disappeared. Today, BBSing survives largely as a nostalgic hobby in most parts of the world, but it is still a popular form of communication for Taiwanese youth. CPTT Bulletin Board System. Most surviving BBSs are accessible over Telnet and typically offer free email accounts, FTP services, and IRC. Some offer access through packet-switched networks or packet radio connections. History, edit. Precursors, edit. A precursor to the public bulletin board system was community memory, which started in August 1973 in Berkeley, California. Microcomputers did not exist at that time, and modems were both expensive and slow. Community memory ran on a mainframe computer and was accessed through terminals located in several San Francisco Bay Area neighborhoods. The poor quality of the original modem connecting the terminals to the mainframe prompted community memory hardware person, Lee Felsenstein, to invent the penny whistle modem, whose design was influential in the mid-1970s. Community memory allowed the user to type messages into a computer terminal after inserting a coin, and offered a pure bulletin board experience with public messages only, no email or other features. It did offer the ability to tag messages with keywords, which the user could use in searches. The system acted primarily in the form of a buy and sell system, with the tags taking the place of the more traditional classifications. But users found ways to express themselves outside these bounds, and the system spontaneously created stories, poetry and other forms of communications. The system was expensive to operate, and when their host machine became unavailable and a new one could not be found, the system closed in January 1975. Similar functionality was available to most mainframe users, which might be considered a sort of ultra-local BBS when used in this fashion. Commercial systems, expressly intended to offer these features to the public, became available in the late 1970s and formed the online service market that lasted into the 1990s. One particularly influential example was Plato, which had thousands of users by the late 1970s. many of whom used the messaging and chat room features of the system in the same way that would later become common on BBSs. The first BBSs, edit. Early modems were generally either expensive or very simple devices using acoustic couplers to handle telephone operation. The user would pick up the phone, dial a number, then press the handset into rubber cups on the top of the modem. Disconnecting at the end of a call required the user to pick up the handset and return it to the phone. Examples of direct connecting modems did exist, and these often allowed the host computer to send it commands to answer or hang up calls, but these were very expensive devices used by large banks and similar companies. With the introduction of microcomputers with expansion slots, like the S100 bus machines and Apple II, it became possible for the modem to communicate instructions and data on separate lines. These machines typically only supported asynchronous communications, and synchronous modems were much more expensive than asynchronous modems. A number of modems of this sort were available by the late 1970s. This made the BBS possible for the first time, as it allowed software on the computer to pick up an incoming call, communicate with the user, and then hang up the call when the user logged off. The first public dial-up BBS was developed by Ward Christensen and Randy Hughes, members of the Chicago Area Computer Hobbyists Exchange, CACH. According to an early interview, when Chicago was snowed under during the Great Blizzard of 1978, the two began preliminary work on the Computerized Bulletin Board System, or CBBS. The system came into existence largely through a fortuitous combination of Christensen having a spare S100 bus computer and an early Hayes internal modem, and Hughes' insistence that the machine be placed at his house in Chicago where it would be a local phone call for more users. Christensen patterned the system after the corkboard his local computer club used to post information like "Need a ride?" CBBS officially went online on the 16th of February, 1978. CBBS, which kept account of callers, reportedly connected 253,301 callers before it was finally retired. Smart modem, edit. A key innovation required for the popularization of the BBS was the smart modem manufactured by Hayes Microcomputer Products. Internal modems like the ones used by CBBS and similar early systems were usable, but generally expensive due to the manufacturer having to make a different modem for every computer platform they wanted to target. They were also limited to those computers with internal expansion, and could not be used with other useful platforms like video terminals. External modems were available for these platforms but required the phone to be dialed using a conventional handset. Internal modems could be software controlled to perform both outbound and inbound calls, but external modems had only the data pins to communicate with the host system. Hayes' solution to the problem was to use a small microcontroller to implement a system that examined the data flowing into the modem from the host computer, watching for certain command strings. This allowed commands to be sent to and from the modem using the same data pins as all the rest of the data, meaning it would work on any system that could support even the most basic modems. The smart modem could pick up the phone, dial numbers, and hang up again, all without any operator intervention. The smart modem was not necessary for BBS use but made overall operation dramatically simpler. It also improved usability for the caller, as most terminal software allowed different phone numbers to be stored and dialed on command, allowing the user to easily connect to a series of systems. The introduction of the smart modem led to the first real wave of BBS systems. Limited in both speed and storage capacity, these systems were normally dedicated solely to messaging, both private email and public forums. File transfers were extremely slow at these speeds, and file libraries were typically limited to text files containing lists of other BBS systems. These systems attracted a particular type of user who used the BBS as a unique type of communications medium, and when these local systems were crowded from the market in the 1990s, their loss was lamented for many years. Higher speeds, commercialization, edit. Speed improved with the introduction of 1200-bit /s asynchronous modems in the early 1980s, giving way to 2400-bit /s fairly rapidly. The improved performance led to a substantial increase in BBS popularity. Most of the information was displayed using ordinary ASCII text or ANSI art, but a number of systems attempted character-based graphical user interfaces which began to be practical at 2400-bit /s. There was a lengthy delay before 9600-bit /s models began to appear on the market. 9600-bit /s was not even established as a strong standard before v.32bis at 14.4-bit /s took over in the early 1990s. This period also saw the rapid rise in capacity and a dramatic drop in the price of hard drives. By the late 1980s, many BBS systems had significant file libraries, and this gave rise to leeching users calling BBSs solely for their files. These users would use the modem for some time, leaving less time for other users, who got busy signals. The resulting upheaval eliminated many of the pioneering message-centric systems. This also gave rise to a new class of BBS systems, dedicated solely to file upload and downloads. These systems charged for access, typically a flat monthly fee, compared to the per-hour fees charged by Event Horizon's BBS and most online services. Many third-party services were developed to support these systems, offering simple credit card merchant account gateways for the payment of monthly fees, and entire file libraries on compact disc that made initial setup very easy. Early 1990s editions of BoardWatch were filled with ads for single-click install solutions dedicated to these new sysops. While this gave the market a bad reputation, it also led to its greatest success. During the early 1990s, there were a number of mid-sized software companies dedicated to BBS software, and the number of BBSs in service reached its peak. Towards the early 1990s, BBS became so popular that it spawned 3 monthly magazines: BoardWatch, BBS Magazine, and in Asia and Australia, Chips Then Bits magazine, which devoted extensive coverage of the software and technology innovations and people behind them, and listings to US and worldwide BBSs. In addition, in the US, a major monthly magazine, Computer Shopper, carried a list of BBSs along with a brief abstract of each of their offerings. GUIs, edit. Through the late 1980s and early 1990s, there was considerable experimentation with ways to develop user-friendly interfaces for BBSs. Almost every popular system used ANSI-based color menus to make reading easier on capable hardware and terminal emulators, and most also allowed cursor commands to offer command line recall and similar features. Another common feature was the use of autocomplete to make menu navigation simpler, a feature that would not reappear on the web until decades later. A number of systems also made forays into GUI-based interfaces, either using character graphics sent from the host, or using custom GUI-based terminal systems. The latter initially appeared on the Macintosh platform, where Telefinder and First Class became very popular. First Class offered a host of features that would be difficult or impossible under a terminal-based solution, including bidirectional information flow and non-blocking operation that allowed the user to exchange files in both directions while continuing to use the message system and chat. all in separate windows. Will Price's Hermes, released in 1988, combined a familiar PC style with Macintosh GUI interface. Hermes was already venerable by 1994, although the Hermes 2 release remained popular. Skypix featured on Amiga a complete markup language. It used a standardized set of icons to indicate mouse-driven commands available online and to recognize different file types present on BBS storage media. It was capable of transmitting data like images, audio files, and audio clips between users linked to the same BBS or offline if the BBS was in the circuit of the FidoNet organization. On the PC, efforts were more oriented to extensions of the original terminal concept, with the GUI being described in the information on the host. One example was the Remote Imaging Protocol, essentially a picture description system, which remained relatively obscure. Probably the ultimate development of this style of operation was the dynamic page implementation of the University of Southern California BBS, USCPS, by Susan Bidlacombe, which predated the implementation of the HTML dynamic web page. A complete dynamic web page implementation was accomplished using TBBS with a TDBS add-on presenting a complete menu system individually customized for each user. Rise of the Internet and decline of BBS, edit. The demand for complex ANSI and ASCII screens and larger file transfers taxed available channel capacity, which in turn increased demand for faster modems. 14.4 kbit/s modems were standard for a number of years while various companies attempted to introduce non-standard systems with higher performance, normally about 19.2 kbit/s. Another delay followed due to a long v.34 standards process before 28.8 kbit/s was released, only to be quickly replaced by 33.6 kbit/s, and then 56 kbit/s. These increasing speeds had the side effect of dramatically reducing the noticeable effects of channel efficiency. When modems were slow, considerable effort was put into developing the most efficient protocols and display systems possible. TCP/IP ran slowly over 1200 bit/s modems. 56 bit/s modems could access the protocol suite more quickly than with slower modems. Dial-up internet service became widely available in the mid-1990s to the general public outside of universities and research laboratories, and connectivity was included in most general use operating systems by default as internet access became popular. These developments together resulted in the sudden obsolescence of bulletin board technology in 1995 and the collapse of its supporting market. Technically, Internet service offered an enormous advantage over BBS systems, as a single connection to the user's Internet service provider allowed them to contact services around the world. In comparison, BBS systems relied on a direct point-to-point connection, so even dialing multiple local systems required multiple phone calls. Internet protocols also allowed a single connection to be used to contact multiple services simultaneously, for example, downloading files from an FTP library while checking the weather on a local news website. Even with a shell account, it was possible to multitask using job control or a terminal multiplexer such as New Screen. In comparison, a connection to a BBS allowed access only to the information on that system. Estimating numbers, edit. According to the FidoNet nodalist, BBSs reached their peak usage around 1996, which was the same period that the World Wide Web and AOL became mainstream. BBSs rapidly declined in popularity thereafter, and were replaced by systems using the Internet for connectivity. Some of the larger commercial BBSs, such as Max Megabyte and Exec PC BBS, evolved into Internet service providers. The website textfiles.com serves as an archive that documents the history of the BBS. The historical BBS list on textfiles.com contains over 105,000 BBSs that have existed over a span of 20 years in North America alone. The owner of textfiles.com, Jason Scott, also produced BBS, the documentary, a DVD film that chronicles the history of the BBS and features interviews with well-known people, mostly from the United States, from the heyday BBS era. In the 2000s, most traditional BBS systems migrated to the Internet using Telnet or SSH protocols. As of September 2022, between 900 and 1,000 are thought to be active via the Internet, fewer than 30 of these being of the traditional dial-up, modem, variety. Software and hardware, edit. Unlike modern websites and online services that are typically hosted by third-party companies in commercial data centers, BBS computers, especially for smaller boards, were typically operated from the system operator's home. As such, access could be unreliable, and in many cases, only one user could be on the system at a time. Only larger BBSs with multiple phone lines using specialized hardware, multitasking software, or LAN connecting multiple computers, could host multiple simultaneous users. The first BBSs used homebrew software, quite often written or customized by the system operators themselves, running on early S100 bus microcomputer systems such as the Altair 8800, IMSI 8080 and Chrome MCO under the CP/M operating system. Soon after, BBS software was being written for all of the major home computer systems of the late 1970s era: the Apple II, Atari 8-bit computers, Commodore PET, and TRS-80 being some of the most popular. In 1981, the IBM personal computer was introduced and MS-DOS soon became the operating system on which the majority of BBS programs were run. Our BBS PC, ported over from the CP/M world, and Fido BBS, developed by Tom Jennings, who later founded FidoNet, were the first notable MS-DOS BBS programs. Many successful commercial BBS programs were developed, such as PC Board BBS, Remote Access BBS, Magpie and Wildcat. BBS. Popular freeware BBS programs included Teleguard BBS and Renegade BBS, which both had early origins from leaked WIV BBS source code. BBS systems on other systems remained popular, especially home computers, largely because they catered to the audience of users running those machines. The ubiquitous Commodore 64, introduced in 1982, was a common platform in the 1980s. Popular commercial BBS programs were Blueboard, Ivory BBS, Color 64 and CNET 64. In the early 1990s, a small number of BBSs were also running on the Commodore Amiga. Popular BBS software for the Amiga were ABBS, AmiPress, CNET, Stormforce BBS, Infinity and Tempest. There was also a small faction of devoted Atari BBSs that used the Atari 800, then the 800 XL, and eventually the 1040 ST. The earlier machines generally lacked hard drive capabilities, which limited them primarily to messaging. MS-DOS continued to be the most popular operating system for BBS use up until the mid-1990s, and in the early years, most multinode BBSs were running under a DOS-based multitasker such as DESCView or consisted of multiple computers connected via LAN. In the late 1980s, a handful of BBS developers implemented multitasking communications routines inside their software, allowing multiple phone lines and users to connect to the same BBS computer. These included Galacticum's Major BBS, later World Group, ESOFT the breadboard system, TBBS, and Falcon. Other popular BBSs were Maximus and Opus, with some associated applications such as Binkleterm being based on characters from the Barclay-breathed cartoon strip of Bloom County. Though most BBS software had been written in BASIC or Pascal, with some low-level routines written in assembly language, the C language was starting to gain popularity. By 1995, many of the DOS-based BBSs had begun switching to modern multitasking operating systems, such as OS/2, Windows 95, and Linux. One of the first graphics-based BBS applications was Excalibur BBS with low bandwidth applications that required its own client for efficiency. This led to one of the earliest implementations of electronic commerce in 1996 with replication of partner stores around the globe. TCP/IP networking allowed most of the remaining BBSs to evolve and include internet hosting capabilities. Recent BBS software, such as Synchrony, Mystic BBS, LBBS, Doc, Magpie or Wildcat BBS, provide access using the Telnet protocol rather than dial-up, or by using legacy DOS-based BBS software with a fossil to Telnet redirector such as NetFOS. Presentation, edit. BBSs were generally text-based, rather than GUI-based, and early BBSs conversed using the simple ASCII character set. However, some home computer manufacturers extended the ASCII character set to take advantage of the advanced color and graphics capabilities of their systems. BBS software authors included these extended character sets in their software, and terminal program authors included the ability to display them when a compatible system was called. Atari's native character set was known as ATASCII, while most Commodore BBSs supported PETSCI. PETSCI was also supported by the nationwide online service Quantum Link. The use of these custom character sets was generally incompatible between manufacturers. Unless a caller was using terminal emulation software written for, and running on, the same type of system as the BBS, the session would simply fall back to simple ASCII output. For example, a Commodore 64 user calling an Atari BBS would use ASCII rather than the native character set of either. As time progressed, most terminal programs began using the ASCII standard, but could use their native character set if it was available. Cocone, a BBS system made by Coconut Computing, Inc., was released in 1988 and only supported a GUI. No text interface was initially available but eventually became available around 1990, and worked in EGA/VGA graphics mode, which made it stand out from text-based BBS systems. Cocone's bitmap and vector graphics and support for multiple type fonts were inspired by the Plato system, and the graphics capabilities were based on what was available in the Bullentin graphics interface library. A competing approach called Remote Imaging Protocol, RIP, emerged and was promoted by Telegraphics in the early to mid-1990s, but it never became widespread. A teletext technology called NAPOPS was also considered, and although it became the underlying graphics technology behind the Prodigy service, it never gained popularity in the BBS market. There were several GUI-based BBSs on the Apple Macintosh platform, including Telefinder and First Class, but these were mostly confined to the Mac market. In the UK, the BBC Micro-based OBBS software, available from Pace for use with their modems, optionally allowed for color and graphics using the teletext-based graphics mode available on that platform. Other systems used the view data protocols made popular in the UK by British Telecom's Prestel service, and the online magazine Microne 800, whom were busy giving away modems with their subscriptions. Over time, terminal manufacturers started to support ANSI X3.64 in addition to or instead of proprietary terminal control codes, for example, color, cursor positioning. The most popular form of online graphics was ANSI Art, which combined the IBM extended ASCII character sets blocks and symbols with ANSI escape sequences to allow changing colors on demand, provide cursor control and screen formatting, and even basic musical tones. During the late 1980s,